Hi, I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Connor.
And I promise this is interesting.
Lindsey.
Connor.
It's your week today.
Yes, it is.
What do you have for
God
us?
bless. I want to ask you, how familiar are you with the state of Washington?
The state of Washington?
Yeah. Not like the state of our
like-
government,
Yeah.
like the state of America, but
general
the
state of things.
literal Washington state.
I've been to Washington twice. Once was for a video game tournament called the International for Dota 2, and it was in Seattle. And the next time I would be in Washington was for a job on a television show called Penelope that is now on, I think, Netflix or Hulu with the Duplass brothers. There's that one where I had to drive all the gear up from Los Angeles to Seattle
Right.
in a big, like, 2-ton.
Lest we forget. And
Lest
you
we
made like
forget.
$6,000 off that job, right?
No, I did not. I made very, 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 very little money.
You got a free lunch.
Yeah, I got it, basically a free lunch.
Well, what's your experience with Washington been like?
Not much. I mean, I like it. I remember when I was staying in Washington the last time I stayed in Seattle, it was beautiful. I went running on the Sound, and I thought it was gorgeous. That's kind of it. I know Seattle's very pretty, and that's about all I know about Washington.
Yeah. Right. So we went to Washington. We moved around quite a bit when I was a kid. And
Right.
when we weren't moving, we were traveling. So we had a travel trailer that we hitched to the back of my dad's pickup truck. And we kind of drove all throughout the United States, visited, I think, 48 out of the 50 states by the time I was
Wow.
8 or 9. I mean, we did a ton of traveling. And we went to Washington a couple of times, I think. And I don't remember a thing about it.
So-
but when I was growing up, I would be like, I liked Washington a lot. And my mom would be like, you don't even remember it.
What are the 2 states you haven't been to yet?
I have not been to Kentucky or Alaska.
That's right. We've been trying to make a Kentucky trip happen.
I got to get to Kentucky. We got to end on Alaska.
Yeah.
You can't end
Alaska
on Kentucky.
has to be the end of it.
Yeah.
It's got to be like that that very sad Google commercial that you and I quote all the time of the
Oh, God.
the
Loretta
old-
loved scallops.
Loretta loves scallops.
Yeah.
And
Alaska.
And Alaska.
Yeah, she used to go fishing in Juneau or
Yeah.
something, and it's precious.
Hey Google, show me pictures of Loretta.
I always think of you when I see that commercial. I'm like, that's going to be me if I ever lose you, which I won't, because I'm going to die way before you. Anyway, I asked you about Washington because today we are talking about Friday Harbor and the Pig War.
Excuse me.
Yes. So Friday Harbor is the heart of the San Juan Islands. Just based on the name, San Juan Islands, where do you think Friday Harbor is?
I'd have to guess like on the Baja coast of Mexico.
Right. It's in Washington. It's off the state of Washington. San Juan Islands.
San Juan Islands.
How'd that happen?
Okay.
We're going to talk about it. So the San Juan Islands are located in the Pacific Northwest between Washington State and British Columbia, Canada,
Okay.
which you'll be familiar with. That's your homeland.
Yeah.
This is you're a dirty, filthy. You snuck in, didn't you?
I'm American. Thank you.
It's also Canadian. So this is a ruggedly gorgeous, somewhat isolated part of continental America where the Chris McCandlesses of the world can comb beaches and kayak into unadulterated wild blue wilderness.
Who is Chris McCandless?
He was that really young adventurer who went off he became a hermit and went to Alaska and just became more and more remote from campers. He was camping by himself in the off season. And then he was living in this bus, this like tiny camper converted bus when he starved to death and died in the bus. And he was only 24 years old when that happened.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Kind of like Into the Wild or whatever that book
It's
was.
based on him.
Oh,
Yeah,
it is?
That's based on a
Okay.
real guy.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
John Krakauer wrote a book about him. It's very interesting. But yeah, so speaking of which, less than 2,600 people live in Friday Harbor full time. So it's a very small
That's tiny.
town of locals.
That's tiny. Because I grew up in Myrtle Beach. And
Yeah, how many people live in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina?
I mean, we just visited there.
It feels like 8 people live there.
Right. I think the population right now is about 35 to 40,000.
Yeah, that feels right.
You know, and Myrtle Beach is not a big town by any
No.
means.
But there's plenty to do. It's very funny. You don't need that many people to have like decent restaurants and
Yeah.
nice beaches and like things to do.
right. But you got to imagine like that's what 30 to 40,000 looks like. I mean, 2,600 is
Yeah.
very little.
Very tiny. A travel blogger described the San Juan Islands as a, quote, bucolic melange of sustainable farms and attractive B&Bs, where the pace hasn't changed much since the 1950s.
What does
unquote.
bucolic mean?
I had to look it up too because I immediately went Black Plague. But no, bucolic means like pleasant countryside.
Sure.
Yeah. And from all the pictures I've seen, the San Juan Islands look absolutely gorgeous.
I'm sure they are.
Just-
Washington I've done a lot of driving in my life.
Yeah, you really have. Yeah.
Across the United States specifically. And Washington State is without question, the most beautiful state I've had to drive through.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
The Pacific Northwest is tons of cliffs, lighthouses.
Oh, it's unbelievable.
It's really something else. Maine is the only thing that rivals it, but the people of Maine are a little funny. They know that you're not from Maine, and they're like, why are you here?
Right, because there's 10 people in each town.
Yeah, and if you look like someone who's about to litter, they want you out. Like, you get right at it. If you're not as granola as them, you are not welcome.
If you litter in Maine, Stephen King busts from the bushes and throws it at you.
He does, and then they litter you into the ocean, and you will never be heard from again. So we want to talk about the history of Washington State, specifically the San Juan Islands, and then we're going to get back to Friday Harbor.
How did we get to San Juan, and who named it? Who founded it, and who named it?
Surprising all of us, I'm sure.
Oh, boy.
There were people already living here.
Of course.
Before Europe stomped its big, giant, boat-sized foot on the shore. So the Coast Salish peoples inhabited the islands and their waterways for at least 10,000 years before Spanish explorers found their way to the island in the late 18th century.
So this is a Native American tribe, the Salish people.
So the Salish people, it consists of what we would now call Native Americans and First Nations people because it's very far north. It's right there on the Canadian border.
Right, that's the thing, because when I know about Seattle, it more or less shares a border with Vancouver. Like, it's kind of right there.
Yeah. So San Juan Islands, it's like right between, what did I say? It's between Washington State and British Columbia, but specifically Vancouver Island.
Right.
So it's right there. It's a situation kind of like Buffalo, which is less picturesque, but like similar. You can look across the lake and you can see Toronto and all its glittering beauty. So the Coast Salish peoples includes a wide variety of tribes. We find ourselves in this situation a lot in American and Canadian history, where there used to be a tribe that had thousands, maybe millions of people in it. And then for one reason or another, that population gets decimated.
Right.
May or may not be someone's fault. We don't know. We'll never know. But then the very few people who survive that decimation end up coming together and creating kind of a new tribe. And linguistically, it's very difficult to track that where this
sense,
word originates and where this name comes from.
Right. You got to think in that area, you're talking about a bunch of islands, different islands. You mentioned Vancouver Island, right?
Yeah.
The San Juan Islands. I mean, I imagine the mainland of Vancouver and the mainland of where we call Seattle, they probably all had different tribes on them.
Yes, and a lot of them moved seasonally. So they would all come to the coast or to the rivers, and they would fish seasonally, and then they would move further inland when winter came and live in permanent wooden cabins that they built.
And so I imagine a lot of these tribes were separated. They probably have their own histories, their own languages.
Yes.
They probably had some commonalities, but they had their own people.
Yes. The only thing that we really know for sure that they had in common was some hunting and fishing practices and some similar linguistic practices.
Okay.
But other than that, we've lost a lot of that information. And
and
now the tribes themselves, that's why it's just the Coast Salish peoples that encompasses
about
probably
16,
20 different tribes of people.
Yeah.
But now those tribes only consist of 1,000 people each. So
that makes sense. I mean, it is the unfortunate thing of when colonizers come to an area, that people who live there currently are going to get pushed out.
Yeah.
That has happened throughout history.
Always happens.
Especially in America. I mean, America is just the biggest example because there was the most land with the most native tribes that lived there before.
Yeah.
Right?
So one of the tangents I wanted to go on. So one of these longstanding tribes is the nooksack. Their territory...
hold on. We can't just glaze over that one. I'm going to be a child and say that you said the nooksack.
Nooksack.
Not nutsack.
I swear to God. Have they not been through enough? Zip it.
Somebody has to say it. Okay.
Nooksack. Okay.
Nooksack. Okay.
Their territory extended originally from the mountains to the coast of Washington, into the watershed of the Nooksack River, and up north into British Columbia, Canada. That's a huge swath of land.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah. And they set up seasonal camps by the Nooksack River to fish and hunt. And then they also would move further inland where they had more permanent long cabins that they would live in. In the 1770s, Spanish explorers brought their big, luscious mustaches and sacks of Iberian ham to the island. And what else did they bring with them?
I'm going to guess the plague.
Smallpox. You were almost exactly right. So like everywhere else on the continent, the Nooksack population was decimated by smallpox.
Right.
And those few that did survive the initial infection lost access to most of their hunting and fishing grounds because the Europeans really, really wanted it.
And you said that was in the 1700s?
Yeah,
Wow,
1770s.
that seems like really late because we were fighting the War of Independence in 1776.
Yeah.
That's crazy. I guess we hadn't gone that far yet, right?
It's also like rugged wilderness. Like
Right.
you have to think like Manifest Destiny. It hadn't like we weren't expanding that
happened.
far west yet.
Yeah.
We were still fighting over the Northeast. Like we were still figuring out who was going to get Boston. Like we didn't have time to worry about Seattle. We're like, what is that?
Right.
What's
Is
on the
France
other
on
side?
our
Who
side?
knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. Like we don't know what's going on. So that's in the 1770s. In 1934, just a little time later, this happened basically overnight. President FDR passed the Indian Reorganization Act.
Right.
And it was supposed to help improve the condition of indigenous peoples by enabling them to restore self-government.
Which I'm going to take a wild guess and say it probably didn't do that.
It did not. No, it did not. It was not very successful because the nooksack had not been granted reservation land by the U.S. government yet. They were not recognized as a tribe at the time.
Really? Is it because they were so splintered?
Because they were splintered and there were very few people.
I see.
And also, this was in a really, we're going to talk a little bit about border control here.
Okay.
But there was a lot of skirmishes between the French and not so much the French actually, but the Spanish, the British, what would eventually become Canada, native tribes, and the Americans figuring out who owns what. Because this is, even right now, it's right on the border of Canada and America. So everybody was trying to figure out who owns this archipelago and who owns this waterway and this strait. And this went on for centuries trying to figure out who owned this land outright.
Right.
So it took us a long time to figure that out. So all of that to say that like recognizing a native tribe was like way low on the list of priorities.
No, we talked about this, I think, I think this week, like no president has ever, as far as we can tell, no president has ever helped Native Americans in any way, shape, or form.
None of them care because there's no money in it.
There is no money in it.
Yeah, like elections are not won and lost by how you treat the indigenous people that live here.
Exactly.
So
even your favorite president, Teddy, was not very kind to the natives.
I love Teddy Roosevelt, and also he was evil.
He was evil to the Native Americans.
Awful.
And like even modern presidents don't take care of the Native Americans.
They don't even talk about and now it's just like, what? Who?
Yeah.
Who were they?
That's why,
Where do they live?
I think Obama got in trouble for laying a pipeline across Native American land.
Yeah,
It's like,
right.
we're doing this still. Like, what are we talking about?
Can you read a book? Did anybody at Harvard study history for 5 minutes? So figuring out like getting official recognition and then getting some land back would be a huge deal for the nooksack people.
Right.
So 1934, this is like a really big deal. So the tribe started working on a tribal constitution to establish a new elected government under its model. This would give them a lot more negotiating power with the U.S. government. And they also took a census in 1942. And this is the document they still use to prove and determine nooksack lineage. So if you don't have a relative that was in the census in 1942, it's really difficult to get like tribal recognition and to get your card. If you
and there
cards.
was, like you said, there's so few people back then that were of that tribe.
Exactly. And there was actually like, I started going down a separate rabbit hole because I guess there was like a leader in this tribe and then the lineage was called into question because they didn't have a relative on the 1942 census.
Oh, interesting.
They're like, did you lie? And there's all this back and forth and it's, so that's the document primarily that they use. But of course, that's probably missing a lot of people.
Well, it's very convenient that we use a document that's over 100 years old at this point to try and,
Well, also you have to think the tribe is well over 10,000 years old.
Right.
And you took the first census in 1942.
Yeah.
We're missing some people for sure.
Right. And that's the thing. Like
Just the failure of
tribes.
paperwork.
Yeah. Seriously. Bureaucracy. It's like, we're going to introduce bureaucracy.
Yeah. That'll fix it.
Yeah.
That'll make it better.
Right.
So as a result of all this hard work, the nooksack were awarded 1 acre of land.
A single acre?
To be used as their reservation.
Stop. That's ridiculous.
I'd like to just remind everybody that originally, before the Spanish got here, they had the mountains, they had the coast of Washington, watershed of the Nooksack River, and then up north into British Columbia, Canada.
And they were given a single acre.
1 acre.
Which, let's be clear, my dad kind of, I don't know if your dad works in construction, so you probably have the same idea. I don't think most houses nowadays are not built on a single acre of land.
No.
For a single family.
No. Like in California, like in Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York City, where like real estate is like exorbitantly expensive.
Right.
Probably like less than an acre for a tiny, skinny little house.
Exactly.
Most places in the country, no, because you have all this big open land. So it's like you're not on 1 acre. 1 acre is your backyard.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
When I was living in Texas, we had 30 acres and we had horses and pigs, but still, that was not you knew where I was.
Right.
I couldn't get lost
You could see
on 30
full,
acres.
you could see straight across the plot.
Yeah. So 1 acre, is that like this room?
Might as well be functionally.
Yeah.
And for how many people? Do you have that number? It was 1
No,
acre
I
for how
tried
many
to look
people?
up how many people were on the 1942 census for the Nooksack tribe, but I couldn't find it. In 2008, the census was 1,600 people.
Okay.
So I know.
You gotta
I don't know
think
which way to go on that.
It's probably about this. If we let's say it was half. Let's say it's half, right?
Yeah.
Right. What year was this? Did you say the census was taken?
1942.
1942. So yeah, let's say that's about a half a generation.
Yeah.
800 people turns into 1,600 people.
Yeah.
Right. Let's say they
Let's
double.
be generous. Yeah.
An acre for 800 people is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Still,
you can't get 800 people to stand.
You couldn't stand
still on
shoulder
an
to
acre.
shoulder
No.
in a single acre.
Yeah, but that's how big their reservation was. That's what Congress at the time determined they deserved. Their land base has subsequently increased to 3,133 acres.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's been a very straightforward, simple, and respectful
I'm sure it was really
process.
easy. There's just a single piece of paper they had to sign.
I'm sure they just called Pete Buttigieg and explained the situation. And he was like, wait a minute, I know who you are. I know where you are. I know some history of the tribe. That's like definitely a failure paperwork on my part. I'm going to fix it right now.
Isn't Buttigieg from Chicago?
No, he was that mayor in Indiana who ran for president randomly a couple of years ago.
Okay.
And then Biden made him Secretary of Transportation. And
Look,
I don't know anything.
Whatever.
Okay, who
Whatever.
cares? He's also gay and he was in the Navy. So he's got big political aspirations. I'm sure we'll hear from him. But yeah, so I couldn't find out how they were able to increase it. But since FDR's presidency, they've increased it to about 3,000 acres. So that feels better than 1 acre at least.
It does, yeah.
So let's talk a little bit. We're going to get back to the San Juan Islands real quick. Okay. So in 1791, Spanish explorer Francisco de Eliza named the San Juan Islands while sailing under the authority of,
Okay.
let's get this name down, Juan Vicente de Güemes Padilla Horcasitas y Agüello, second count of the Revilla Gigedo,
That was really good pronunciation, Lindsey.
the Victory of Mexico. And that is how you got the San Juan Islands off the coast of Washington State.
Vickery, is that a title?
Vickery.
Because it sounds like a viceroy almost.
It's like a military general, I think, someone high up in government, powerful man with a mustache, as
That's
usual.
like, who's that character in Sweet Life of Zack and Cody? The bellboy, the bellhop.
I never watched Sweet Life of Zack and Cody.
My name is Esteban Julio Ricardo something Ramirez. Right?
This is so embarrassing and is going to show just how Texan I am. But
Okay.
I went to a Texan high school and we had an exchange student my sophomore year. His name was Froy. We all called him Froy. He was Spanish, from his family grew up
from
in Spain, and he
Okay.
had a long Spanish name. It's
Right.
very custom to have 12 names because
Right.
you passed
Much
down
like-
every name in your family.
Yeah, much like the Vickery that we
Exactly
met.
like this.
Yeah.
So one of the things that girls used to do, that white girls used to do, they'd go up to Froy and they'd be like, Froy, can you pronounce your full name?
Oh my
Can you
God.
pronounce that? Because he had this beautiful Spanish accent. He'd be like, oh, I guess. And then he'd say it and they'd all go, oh my God.
Is that like the equivalent of a girl who goes, "Oh my God, your hand's so big. Let's compare hand
Yes.
sizes."
It's like, oh my God, I'm so cold. Can I borrow your hoodie for 12 years?
Okay, what's your sign?
what's
We
your
should
sign?
look up your sign.
Oh my God, you're a Scorpio? Oh my God, that's incredible. You're a Taurus and I'm an Aquarius, and supposedly that's not supposed to mix, but here we are.
Here we are.
Madly in love. So that was in 1791
Okay.
that Francisco de Eliza arrived and named a bunch of things in the
He
San
did,
Juan
that was his
Islands.
thing. He was just naming stuff.
He named a bunch of stuff. He was like, I'm the first guy here. There's nobody else here. And the Nooksack tribe and everybody else was like, actually, we already have names for those. And he was like, no.
Nope. We're going to claim it for the Queen of Spain. Did they have a monarchy at this time?
I think he's on authority to the Victory of Mexico. So I don't know very much about the Spanish Empire.
I don't either.
So at
Embarrassingly.
this time, I don't know. But I think there's a king of Spain.
Okay.
So the next year in 1792, British naval officer George Vancouver explored the island and renamed a few places.
Of course he did.
Namely, Vancouver. Later, in 1841, an American named Charles Wilkes led an expedition that renamed many places in the region after American military leaders. But then a few years later, in 1847, another British naval officer named Henry Collett reworked the region's official charts and reinstated many of the older British and Spanish names. So this led to more Spanish-sounding names in the San Juan and Gulf Islands and more American-sounding names in the Puget Sound.
It's funny how they went back and said, "Oh no, these new names they won't do. We should go back to their original names, their original Spanish names, and not. We should go back to their original names as they were called by the people that we kicked off of this place."
No, this is Spain. Yeah, this has always been Spain. Right. So, given this information, where do you think Friday Harbor got its name?
Gosh, probably from a guy whose last name was Friday.
Hawaii. It's a Hawaiian name.
It's a Hawaiian name?
Yes.
How did a Hawaiian name end up off the coast of Seattle?
I'm going to tell you everything. Friday Harbor is named after Joseph Poley Friday. He was a native Hawaiian who worked at the Puget Sound's agricultural company and later became a shepherd. And his father did exactly the same thing.
What year is this? Hold on. Paint me a picture.
1859.
1859.
So the harbor was named after him by accident in 1859 after a British survey ship called the HMS Plumper was scouting the San Juan Islands. And one of the oarsmen yelled out to a shepherd on the shore, Joe Friday, who was 15 years old at the time, and asked him what the name of the bay was. And Joe thought the man was asking for his name. So he yelled back, Friday. And then everybody in the survey ship just wrote down in their notes, this is Friday's Bay.
Okay, well, hold on. I got a couple of questions. First of all, I didn't know we had discovered Hawaii at that point. America had discovered Hawaii at that point, which is crazy. That's bad on me. I should know that.
I don't know enough about Hawaiian history either. I know at some point Europe discovered it, and like everywhere else, had a very similar.
They started putting plantations everywhere.
Exactly.
Yep.
So
crazy that all that's required from like a scouting ship that's doing surveying, they just did a drive-by. They didn't get off and look. Or
hey, we work for the Royal Friggin' Navy. What is this?
Hey, what's the name of that? What's the name of that place?
I'm Joe. Friday. Okay, that works. No more information needed. And that's why it's called Friday Harbor.
Do your job.
So this area of the world is named, there are some original indigenous names for places. There's also Spanish names, French names now because of the Canadian influence.
Right.
British names, American names.
It's just a calico menagerie of stuff.
Yeah. So you go there and you're like, oh, this is George's Strait. And also that's the Nooksack River. You're like, okay, none of this makes any sense.
Whatever. Yeah.
So that's how we arrive at Friday Harbor. And now we're going to talk about the Pig War.
The Pig War of Friday Harbor.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, there are lots of years in here spent bickering over borders.
Okay.
There was something called the Oregon Treaty on June 15th, 1846, that was supposed to clear it all up, but of course it left some straits unmarked, so the bickering continued. The British think they own this, the Americans think they own this, the natives think everyone should just go back to where they came from, and it's all documents and meetings and last-minute Zoom calls until June 15th, 1859, exactly 13 years after the Oregon Treaty was signed.
Oh, God.
Which is interesting.
Okay.
So Lyman Cutler was an American farmer, and he found a pig rooting around in his garden eating some of his potatoes.
Gotcha.
And this was not the first time this has happened. So as a result, Cutler's pretty pissed off, and he shoots and kills the pig.
Right. Which pigs they typically root. That's their thing.
Yes. Also, this is such a tangent, but an ex-boyfriend's mom had a garden in New Jersey. It was a really nicely kept garden too. Very beautiful. She was good at it. But chipmunks, squirrels, local dogs, cats, they would all dig in and eat her vegetables. So all that hard work earned her a squash every season. And towards the end, she was losing it. She's like, I'm going to put up a barbed wire fence. I'm going to strangle every squirrel I ever look at in my life.
That's common in Texas too, at least where I lived in Central Texas for a little while. Pigs, the wild pigs that would run around.
They just want to eat.
Yeah.
They want to eat everything.
And Central Texans love to shoot them. So.
They do, yeah. So Cutler shoots and kills this pig. Well, it turns out that pig belonged to an Irishman.
Oh, and the Irish.
And his name was...
What do we know about the Irish? One thing for sure is that they know how to hold a grudge.
They're very forgiving people. His name was Charles Griffin.
Okay.
Cutler offered Griffin $10. This would be equivalent to $340 in 2023 money.
That's pretty good for a pig.
To compensate for the pig.
Yeah.
But Griffin was a negotiator. He was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman. So he said, no, multiply that by 10. He wanted $100, the equivalent of $3,400 for this pig.
Pretty nice pig.
Cutler is pissed and changes his whole tactic, claiming that he shouldn't have to pay for the pig at all because the pig was a dirty little trespasser. And according to probably a local journalist who was just trying to spice things up, Cutler said, "It was eating my potatoes." And Griffin said, "It is up to you to keep your potatoes out of my pig."
Which, ironic for an Irishman to say that to somebody else.
Like, I kind of hate that we're talking about an American and an Irishman and a pig and a potato. I don't like how well those two things correlate.
Sounds like a bad joke.
Yeah, it does. So when British authorities threatened to arrest Cutler, nearby American settlers called for military protection from the United States military. And they came.
Oh my God, over a pig.
Yes. Okay, this is another tangent I wanted to go on. But citizens' relationship to their government is not at all what it used to be. It used to be, oh, my neighbor has a nephew who cooks on a ship out near the Puget Sound. I'm going to write him a letter and request that he beat the shit out of you. And then he would. Like, it was like so local. It was so homegrown. You used to be able to walk up to the White House until Abe Lincoln got murdered.
Well, that's what you said. I think you told me this was like, Abe Lincoln used to have a gallery and you could just show up to the White House and wait for him. And if he had time during the day, he would just like meet with you.
Yeah.
And he was the president of the United States.
Yeah. You were just like, hey, I traveled here. I wanted to meet with you and I want to talk about this. The price of corn right now is ridiculous. And Abe would be like, all right, let's talk about corn.
Right. That's a good point. That's
everything.
Like, yeah, politics used to be very localized. Government used to be very localized. Like you knew who your representative was. That was kind of the whole point.
And also like you probably grew up near them.
Right. And you knew where their house was.
Yeah. You knew their family.
Right.
You knew what they did before they were a politician. It was very different. Now everything feels so isolated and
that's what nowadays you don't have that at least in America nowadays.
No, Pete Buttigieg ran for president and you didn't know who he was.
I'd heard of him.
Yeah. Right? Like a vague face comes into your mind. You're like, I think I remember that guy.
He kind of looks like Nathan Fielder.
Yeah.
You know, like I've seen him on TV once.
Exactly. Like, and he's like, my husband builds sets. And you're like, your husband sounds really cool, but you're a politician. I don't know about you. But yeah.
So they send a military response to this dispute between a pig.
Right. So this pig shooting causes an international kerfuffle. So it's wartime, baby. Brigadier General, which is a 1-star general, I had to look it up. Brigadier General William S. Harney dispatched Captain George Pickett and 66 American soldiers to San Juan Island with orders to prevent the British from landing. Now, this concerned the British, who thought the Americans might get too comfortable near their side of the land and refused to leave. They were worried about Americans squatting, basically.
Hilarious.
So they sent 3 Royal Navy warships under the command of Captain Geoffrey Hornby to keep things in check. And if we know anything about the British Empire, we know nothing is going to be kept in check.
Now, again, remind me, what year are we in at this point?
1859.
So at this stage in history, from what I understand, England's navy is still the world power.
By far.
Like without compare.
Yeah.
So sending 3 warships, I mean, that's like us parking 3 warships outside of somewhere, you know, like 3 cruisers.
Just like 10 Blackhawks.
Right.
You're like, for a pig. Like, what, excuse me?
Exactly.
What are we doing? So as it always does, as we always knew it would, as it was written in the stars to occur, the situation escalated. By August, the defending detachment of now 461 Americans with 14 cannons were opposed by 5 British Royal Navy warships, mounting 70 guns and carrying 2,140 men. A local governor employed Hornby, the British general, to stand down and avoid armed conflict if at all possible, but Hornby refused, stating he would not make a move without the express permission of British Rear Admiral. I can never say this word. I always want to say admirable. He would not make a move without the express permission of British Rear Admiral Robert L. Baines. And he hadn't arrived on the island yet because he was probably doing something that was important.
And so who was the person that requested that Hornby stand down?
It was the governor of Vancouver Island.
Okay, so the local governor was like, please
don't do this.
Please cut this out.
This is ridiculous.
And he's like, absolutely not.
No.
You are not in my,
you're not in my jurisdiction. You get back over across the line. This is our strait, damn it.
And over a pig, right? Like, you got to think, at what point do all the soldiers go, wait, why are we here?
Is anybody asking that question?
That's the thing about the military. It's like you are not allowed to do that.
You can't ask questions. Hey, why are we here? Shut up. I told you to be here. That's why.
Exactly. And that's the military is like kind of runs on that mentality. It has to have that mentality. Otherwise, the whole chain of command kind of breaks down, right?
That's why I could never cut it. I want to ask questions and I can't do a pull-up. I'm useless. So when Admiral Baines did finally arrive, he took stock of the situation and told the governor that he would not escalate the conflict further into a war between two great nations over a squabble about a pig. Those are his words.
The voice reason. Now, he did say, I won't escalate it. But what he didn't say strategically is, I will de-escalate it.
No, he did not say that. So when news about this ridiculous crisis reached the faraway capitals of London and Washington, D.C., both nations were shocked at the potential conflict and took immediate action to quell any potential for a future war. So both sides agreed to retain joint military occupation of the island until a final negotiated diplomatic settlement could be reached, reducing their presence to a token force of no more than 100 men.
So I not to cut you off, I imagine this was basically a dispute over the pig. And who owes who what. And it probably escalated into, well, our Navy has jurisdiction over this island. And then the American military going, well, no, this is our island. Like, don't get it twisted.
Well, Cutler claimed that the pig was trespassing.
Right.
But that only holds up if that's actually American property that he's on. If it's British property, then he killed somebody else's pig and he probably owes this guy $3,400.
Right. So on the surface, it's over whose pig did what. But once the governments get involved, it's, okay, where's the line?
It's over land.
Right.
It's always
over land, right?
Yeah. And this is 1859 reminder. So America's got some other things cooking at the moment.
They do.
So they wanted to negotiate and figure out what this line was, but all of their political energy was going towards a certain other conflict that was brewing
between
elsewhere.
themselves.
Yeah.
Which you gotta imagine hilarious. I like to imagine those telegrams were received by the president and the PM at the same time, where they're like fighting over a.
I imagine they're both J.K. Simmons.
Yeah.
Like, what?
Tell them to stop it.
Go home. Yeah, so both sides agreed that there'd only be 100 men there present, just to make sure that nothing gets crazy. But also, if you have any more than that, that could lead to like conflict.
Right, it's basically like the modern, the old equivalent of like a DMZ, like a demilitarized zone.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So today, the Union Jack flag still flies above the former British Royal Marines campsite, being raised and lowered daily by American National Park Service rangers, making it one of the few places without diplomatic status where U.S. federal government employees regularly hoist the flag of another country.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's kind of like, gosh, I'm going to get this so wrong, but somebody in the comments will correct me. There is an island, I want to say, somewhere on the coast, off the coast of like Greenland or Finland or the Nordic countries, that the island's like ownership is kind of disputed, of like who owns it. And they make it like these scientists who go out there make it a game of putting up their own flag and taking down whoever's flag was there. So like the Finns will go out and put up the Finnish flag and they'll take down like the Icelandic flag. And it's a tiny island. It's like a couple of acres wide. But they made it a game. It's like a tradition now that when you, and again, I'm probably getting all of the countries involved and all of the locations incorrect, but there's a place on Earth where that happens and kind of a good, friendly thing.
Yeah.
But you're saying there's the Park Ranger Service hoists the Jolly Roger, not the Jolly Roger, the Union Jack. Not the Jolly Roger. That's so cool.
Yeah. Well, and the reason that happened is because the relationship between the British and Americans were really friendly during this time. So during these years of joint military occupation, the British and American units on San Juan Island had a very amicable mutual life, and they would visit one another's camps for their respective national holidays.
Oh, nice. So they come over for Thanksgiving and we go over for Boxing Day.
Yeah. And they also held like various athletic competitions on the island as well. Park rangers tell visitors the biggest threat to peace on the island during these years of the 1950s and 1960s was the, quote, large amounts of alcohol available, unquote.
That's fantastic.
And this continued for 12 years. We did this.
Wow.
So it wasn't until 1871. This is crazy. I didn't know any of this happened. In 1871, the Canadian territories were undergoing some border changes. And as a result, America and Great Britain had to sort out who would officially own the San Juan Islands. And of course, Friday Harbor, our old friend. To do this, they underwent international arbitration, meaning an entirely neutral third party. In this case, the newly crowned German Kaiser Wilhelm I would act as arbiter.
Wow.
meaning that the German Empire would decide if the British or the Americans would officially own the San Juan Islands
tiny
off the
island,
west coast
yeah.
of North America. Can we just put all the different nations at play here is like insane.
Well, and it started as a peaceful Native American tribe that lived on the islands, just kind of doing their thing.
And now all of Europe is involved.
Somehow, that's what like local governments and bureaucracies do. They get everybody involved at every single level.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy.
So the way that international arbitration works, from my greatly limited understanding, is each country selects a representative, right? Usually like a very charming, well-spoken, Harvard-educated, probably, attorney. And they're each going to state their case, like what they plan to do with the land, why it means anything to them, blah, 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 blah. And then Germany gets to vote on who wins. And Germany voted for America, baby.
That's right.
So the
Shout out
Salish
to the
people were
Germans.
notably not included.
Oh, great.
They were not invited.
Love that.
Yeah. So in 1872, the British withdrew their Royal Marines from the British camp, and the Americans were left to their own devices. Friday Harbor was officially incorporated on February 10th, 1909.
Hey, your birthday.
That's my birthday. I am over 100 years old. Solidifying its status as the only incorporated town in the San Juan Islands. And over the years, the town has evolved, with the marina constructed in the 1970s to accommodate both fishing vessels and pleasure boats.
Wonderful.
And today, it's a bit of a hub for van lifers, schoolies,
of course.
and like other vagabonds who are looking for a little bit more
What's a schoolie?
ayahuasca in their milk tea. if you will.
What? I've never heard the term schoolie. What's a schoolie?
They're people who convert school buses into like
Oh, okay. So van
buses
lifers.
you can live in.
Right. Van lifers, but with school buses.
Exactly,
basically.
yeah.
Gotcha.
While conducting research on Friday Harbor, I found this absolutely lovely dork of a couple that lives in a van and travels the United States, and they run a YouTube channel called Wonderful Revolution.
Love it.
And I just like they're so sweet. This couple just starts this video, and the woman goes, "Hey everybody, we're just gonna spend a couple days here on the beautiful San Juan Island in Friday Harbor.
Well, you watched their San Juan
And
Island video.
We're on our way." Yeah. And then they get there and they're just walking down this beautiful trail lined with trees. And like every 2 seconds they're stopping and she's going, "Hi, this is our friend. First name Douglas, last name Fur." "And this is our other friend. First name Maple, last name Big Leaf." They just like hang out. They go to the lavender fields because a bunch of lavender grows in the Pacific
nice.
Northwest. And you can make a lot of soaps and culinary
Hey,
affects out of that.
shout out to those guys. What was their name again?
Wonderful Revolution.
Wonderful. Hey, shout out. Wonderful
Truly a
Revolution.
lovely time. I loved watching
That sounds great.
video.
Is this your way of kind of soft pitching, becoming a schoolie with me and moving to the
I'm not
Pacific
soft pitching
Northwest?
it at all. This is a hard pitch.
It's a hard pitch.
launch at your head. And I think that couple perfectly encapsulates the sort of community that Friday Harbor attracts.
Yes.
It's people who want to get out into nature, who really want to disconnect. But it's a very tight-knit community.
I imagine.
2,600 people live there. It's the same thing, I imagine, with beach towns.
Right.
Where mostly you're running on tourism, you're running on fishing. And when those people aren't in town, you're just left with a big 2,600 person family.
Right.
Like
exactly.
everybody recognizes everybody.
Exactly. Yeah. Calling a vote really matters in a place like that.
Truly. Yeah.
You
You
know.
need everybody to show up.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for telling me about the pig war
Yes.
of, what was the island again?
Friday Harbor
Friday
in
Harbor
the San Juan
in
Islands,
the San Juan
and the
Islands.
Pig War.
The pig war
Yeah.
of the San Juan Islands. That's amazing. That was very interesting.
I'm very glad you enjoyed it.
I did. I enjoyed it so much.
You know how I found about Friday
How'd
Harbor?
you find out about it?
Okay, well, this is kind of a two-parter.
Okay.
So one, I'm writing a screenplay right now that's set in Bellingham, Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And Bellingham is like right off the coast of the San Juan Islands.
Okay. Which Bellingham, my dad used to play hockey in Bellingham, and
Yes.
you two talked about Bellingham, I
We
think,
did
when we
a
were at
little
Myrtle
bit,
Beach.
yeah. And I've been wanting to go to Bellingham because it looks gorgeous. And it's also supposedly like very artsy and
Right.
very like free expression. Like I love Washington because like, it seems like every place is like that, but it's got its own little flavor to it.
Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for telling us about the Friday Harbor Pig War.
You're so welcome.
It was such an interesting thing.
Yeah. Join us again next week because we're going to be back in Connor's little burrow. He's
I
going to
know.
tell us about something.
I've got something cooking. I think you're going to like it.
Can you tell us any hints?
Absolutely not.
Really?
No hints.
You don't know what it's going to be, do you?
I have an idea of an idea, but
Sounds
you
promising.
know how it
You have
starts. where it's
concepts
like,
of a plan.
yeah. Well, it's like, you know how it starts. You pick one thing, and then that branches off into totally something else.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Like my last episode was about trench warfare, and that actually started with trying to discover what was it? an Arctic balloon accident that happened. So
Ooh.
that, just giving you an idea.
Arctic Balloon is a fun name for a band that I
is.
think Jason Everman would like to be in.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this up.
Okay. I'm Lindsey.
And I'm Connor.
And I told you this would be interesting.
Thank you so much. And join us next week for Lindsey, or for my episode. Not your episode. You just finished your episode.
I can do another episode if you want. I got more pig wars for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, thank you. All right. Bye.
We'll see you guys next week, and I'll see you in 5 seconds.